Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice lunch. My catering was outstanding. How was yours, Tom?
Yeah, I quickly had some toast.
Bit of pot noodle. So this is the last session of UnCon today. It says on the agenda, this is kind of panel wrap up. The reason for this is I kind of was hoping when I planned the agenda, and it's kind of come to fruition, that there were some themes that were coming out and some other areas to explore. So I'm going to want to focus on some areas. Tom seems to have disappeared. If Dane's about, can you jump back on, Dane? Dean, if you're around, jump back on again, mate. I know Etienne and Annalise aren't able to make it, but if Dane or Dean are still here, there's Dane, still eating his lunch. And there's Dean. Cool. Excellent. So we've got everyone but Annalise and Etienne. I hope delegates enjoyed that panel debate. As I was saying after the session, you always, as a moderator, you always have that panic at 30 minutes that you're going to run out of things to talk about. But then the next thing I looked at, it was 58 minutes. So, the time went really quickly. So with no further ado, this last bit, wrap-ups, kind of things I want to just pose to the people I've got on this session here. There was this idea of, standardization of data, but it's come up in other conversations around this subject, this idea of a consortium of approaches to IoT, like a number of HAs getting together and almost creating a suite of use cases to actually describe, some beneficial applications of IoT. I'd be interested to get Dane's perspective as a supplier. How would you see that?
I think that probably is the way. There will be consolidation, no doubt, down the line. I think we're too early in the stage of it to say what we should be measuring, and there's a lot of that, and what sensors should be being used and stuff like that. It's all about driving out where the value lies at the minute, and I think there's still quite a long way to go in that. We had 3 customers ask us about a new product line that we hadn't considered at all 3 months ago, and we just got the go-ahead yesterday to start developing it from one of them. So there's a lot of different things still at play. So I think if you could, it is too disparate, and there's too many different small players who might not have the resourcefulness or the initiative like Dina's had to just. So if there was a bunch of people that came together of smaller players that could do that, then that would be great, because it's quite difficult to deal with some of the bigger boys. Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, well, I actually think that the use cases have been articulated numerous times in terms of the theory of how we could provide services with IoT supporting that. I just think that the time and effort needs to go into really reimagining the way that we organise ourselves in order to deliver those services. And that's why I guess the point that I've continuously gone back to is that we need long-term strategies that are really clear about what we want to be as organisations, and what services we want to provide, what risk we want to hold on to ourselves, and what risk we want to outsource as well.
I mean, this is going to be a good question to Dean, but it's in the same theme of creating like a consortium approach to IoT. It's because this idea of the consortium came from a HA. It was a conversation with a HA who's interested in doing IoT, but sees the value in getting more people together. I mean, it was interesting. His point was, if we can get a consortium together, it actually makes the procurement more viable. So Dean, I know Mid Wales HA because I'm a board member of a subsidiary. You guys in Powys, fairly small HA. You're not the typical demographic for going off and doing a groundbreaking law project, but
Yeah. I think it's still kind of early days for us, where we're trying to see what works, but sort of all the testing we do, smoke alarms, lighting, etc. You can automate all that. I think coming together, we're rolling out some gateways on TTN and Things Network, which are public at the moment. So we're providing coverage for future use, and if the other house associations can get on board on that, where they've got internet connection, like for CCTV, they can put a gateway up there and keep growing the coverage, which would really help.
Does anybody know of any mechanisms or I mean, how, here we have an example with Mid Wales of really interesting application of IoT that's actually delivering some operational benefits. It's probably too early to get key insights on the data, but there's someone doing it yet. So what sits outside that could pull other HAs in Wales? Let's work on a region that could just pull into Wales, so that people aren't consistently reinventing the wheel, which I think Tom's point, where there's lots of little things going on, or lots of suppliers, that could be a danger, that you just keep reinventing the same thing.
Very, very, very true. Yeah, that's it. But it's still very early, isn't it? We're just going to see how it's going to grow and develop. But I think providing coverage on LoRaWAN, that's a huge area. I think everyone can get on board with now, really, and start getting the gateways out there where they can.
I might pose that to Annalise, actually, now that she's joined. Hi, Annalise.
Hi.
We were just talking about a kind of a consortium approach to IoT and social housing, where you can pull together a number of HAs to kind of thrash out, well, what would they use it for? Maybe it would help in procurement. But we've got to posing a question where here you have Dean at a small HA in Wales,
mm-hmm.
who's doing some groundbreaking stuff that's getting, real tangible outcomes from it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there mechanisms or ways of getting Dean's story out there so that other HAs aren't just repeating what he's done? It's almost like he's a trailblazer. How can they follow in his trail, not just repeat what he's done?
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of it is grassroots, but I would say with the Catapult, it's definitely a good place to start. We are a supporter of SMEs. I'm actually developing a built environment pipeline for SMEs. So we're basically doing a horizon scan of basically what the built environment niche areas that sort of align with the Catapult's vision to support the UK PLC, and SMEs are a massive part of our streamline. We actually bring a lot of them in and support them and show them how to maximize their product. But I think also to be honest, I think there's a real opportunity here with the IoT, and that is to actually align with what's going on with retrofit. I think we've got, projects like the Parity Project, which are working with social housing to look at retrofitting their products. And I think this has to happen simultaneously. So if we can align with people like, with like Parity Project, and actually I would say with the Green Investment Institute, they've got a lot of things that are happening which are focusing on how not only to afford to retrofit our homes, but to basically get them to be fit for 2050 effectively. So I think this agenda needs to align more so that we have a share of information, because at the heart of all of this, it's really about making sure that our housing stock is fit for purpose and that the occupant understands how it works and how to offset any negative impacts. And some of those impacts are actually costs to them on how to run their house. So you have to align this a lot more. And I think aligning with the supply and demand and the technology into the building fabrics that are happening around retrofit. There's a lot of like MMC movement there, aligning there. This is really where you'll start catalyzing this innovation, but also bringing it into the actual fabrics of deliverability, which is what we need to see to scale up all of our homes.
I'd be really interested to dig into the detail of what the government are proposing in terms of this £5,000 voucher, because I can tell you now, if it's about energy efficiency, I'd spend some of that on smart heating controls, perhaps. I'm upgrading my heating system. So we'll have to wait and see. Something we talked about briefly in the break with Tom and Annalise, you on it as well, was, Tom, you were developing this idea around, outsourcing sort of services. So do you want to expand a little bit on what you were talking about there?
Yeah. So again, I've mentioned it, but our highest risk work is outsourced already, and I guess part of what IoT suppliers need to really do is kind of break those quite traditional markets of specialist suppliers or specialist organisations which are managing that risk for us or managing that work for us, and therefore I do think that an outsourced model that delivers those same things at a lower cost is a quick route to scale in the sector.
Okay, there's a point there, and it's probably equal to Dean and to Dane, and I'll go to Dean first if that's all right. The project you're doing, are you integrating that data into your housing management system? Was it sitting outside of that?
Yeah, that is the long-term goal. It is actually sitting outside of it at the moment, but we want to get it all integrated going forwards, where it's all interacting with our.
Has your supplier engaged with you at all to say, "Oh, what is this? What are you doing?" Or
we're going to be moving to a different housing management system soon, so that's going to put a bit of a hold on it, but we will get there and have it integrated. Yeah.
Okay. Before I go to Dane, obviously I've got a perspective on this, having worked with a housing management supplier for a number of years. My concern is that I have these conversations with housing management suppliers, so I'm not talking out of school or anything. I always say to them, you've got to bear in mind relevancy, and you're in danger of becoming irrelevant if you're not careful. You will go the way of the dinosaur if you're not careful. So it's interesting that here you have, we keep making the point, Dean is an outlier, he's a trailblazer, he's doing interesting stuff. Yet your key line of business system, the provider, isn't actually engaging with you and going, do you know what? I want to take that data and I want to put it into this and I want to see what it does. So the point is, do you think maybe the suppliers who have a lot of control in the market, do they actually, rather than just seeing IoT as this, again, another silo of technology, do you think maybe they should be diving in a bit more?
Yeah, that's initially the sort of wall we come up with Capita. They just initially, but I think as time's moved on, they can see the potential now.
Okay, Dane, your perspective as a supplier of this kind of tech, mate.
Yeah, well, some of our projects are about integrating it. The Renfrewshire project will be about integrating it. It wasn't initially. I'm just amazed. It's a bit like what you're just saying. I'm just amazed that these guys haven't been doing it themselves. I know you did some stuff at Capita early days. That's clearly where you got your Tesla from. But I'm just amazed that they haven't. But yeah, I don't really know how to answer it, to be honest. I mean, yeah, we are doing some integration work, and it's the most common sense thing to do. And I'm sure Tom's already doing it with his. Tom's also the trailblazer in the bigger organization. And what he was saying earlier on about, some of the use cases are already well defined is so true. And I completely agree with that. There's lots of really good use cases and we need to keep building it. It's just the potential. There's so many others that we don't even know about. You don't know what you don't know.
There's an interesting question that's been posed by Tony Bradley, one of the delegates, about the GDPR implications of tenant data and tracking data. I can give an experience of the pilot, which I said in the panel debate, which was when that pilot was undertaken, the HA was very transparent about what the sensors were, what data they'd actually be capturing, giving access to that data, but then telling the tenant what they were going to use the data for, and kind of almost setting out the expectation, this is what it is. But Tom, have you looked at this GDPR implications of this kind of tracking data?
Yeah, well, we haven't really deployed any data which truly captures tenant information, any IoT which captures tenant information. I guess the IoT that we have delivered has been really about our critical assets in the property, such as our sort of communal heating plants, and therefore there's been relatively low interaction with the tenant around that. But on the whole, you're collecting property information, not tenant information. And if you decide yourself to analyze that in such a way that you make assumptions based on lifestyle, etc., then of course there's GDPR implications about how you store and use that information. Yeah.
But I think that was the point that we got Etienne to expand on, wasn't it? Because it was Dean that said, an example of humidity and black mold formulation ended up being a lifestyle implication. But I think that does. But weirdly, whilst Etienne did articulate there's a potential problem there, I think you said it there, Tom, that actually, yes, it might be lifestyle, but you're actually looking after the fabric of the building. You've identified, for example, that they're closing all the windows, ramping the heating up, blah, 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 blah. That's a lifestyle problem.
There's far more sensitive information held on housing management systems about antisocial behaviour cases, housing need, etc., than I guess what the temperature of the room is.
So again, it comes down to visibility and being open and transparent with the data.
Yeah. Good data quality, I guess, is important at every level of the business, and that applies as much to IoT data from the property as it would anything else.
And you're not just protecting the fabric of the building; you're also protecting the health of the tenant, because as we've seen with the data coming through because of coronavirus, certain demographics within society are far more hard hit by poor housing quality, and so we are very, very directly. They're all.
Oh, we just lost.
I think there's one thing to consider, though, is that this is where standards and standards of use may be really important, because I just think about the NHS and the dementia homes that they were working on, where people literally had physical monitors as well as the sensors within their actual dwelling, and they were able to actually tell how physiologically they were doing, if there was a behavior change. And likewise, there's a lot of evidence out of pilots coming from Homes and Healthy Aging out of the University of Nottingham, where they were literally having to revisit the amount of sensors they were putting on, for example, on somebody's bed. It doesn't matter how old you are, you might want to have some privacy on what happens on your bed. So it depends on, what are we doing with that information? More importantly, who's using that information and for what purpose, and to be completely transparent about that, because you never know what you do know what the sensors are picking up, but that data can be analyzed in very different ways. And the occupant of that data needs to be very transparent. And, we're coming out of a time when Facebook has completely demoralized our thoughts on a democratic process. So we're not taking this lightly now. People are in very different generations interpreting the data share very, very differently. And so transparency is good, but also what is the standard acceptance for what level of data is needed, I think is also a question worth having, or a discussion worth having.
And just to build on that, I guess one brief statement is that this is a care function rather than a traditional housing function. And I guess there's all the questions that would be posed to us. Well, I mean, we do have LQ does have an in-house care and support business, but on the most part, housing associations don't. And so all of these questions are the same questions that we would be asking ourselves if we were setting up a care and support business.
It is that fine line, isn't it? Of daddy knows best or mummy knows best. That approach to sometimes trying to manage the tenant and manage the tenant's lifestyle, which Tom articulated it perfectly. Tenants, for the vast majority of social housing tenants, they're in a home for life. It's their home. It's the same is it as this in our own homes? You know, why? For me, the technology should make their lives easier. It should have some kind of benefit to the landlord, but if you put the tenant at the center of what you're doing, that everything flows back from that. It's okay, if we're going to do this, what value does the tenant get? What does it bring for them? And I think that's the judgment. It's like, okay, if the tenant gets zero value, if we can't articulate a value to that tenant, should we be doing it? I'm intrigued. You know, Dean, is there any areas of the project that you've been embarked on, or any future things that you looked at and thought, don't know if we want to do that or not?
Yeah, the guys were talking about maybe creating like antisocial sort of package where you're monitoring noise levels and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah, so I'm not too sure on that, but I think for us at the moment, just concentrate on the asset side of it, where it's not person, it's more the kind of the property and the fabric of the buildings we're monitoring. Although we have been experimenting with a vulnerable persons package, trying to create that using LoRaWAN. It works really well, but there's you're building up a profile of a person with that, so there's a lot more to think about long term.
I think, to be fair, you can see why I, back in 2014, steered clear of care and focused on the property.
Yeah.
6 years later, we're still exploring some of the key questions around, you know, sensors relating to people.
Yeah.
What impact that has, and it's going to take probably a lot longer to bottom that out.
It is. It's quite easy to put together with sensors. It's very straightforward and inexpensive. But yeah, there's a lot more to think about.
I just wanted to add to that, Stuart. I mean, if you look at the way housing delivery is actually looking, though, the importance of understanding how the house works is increasingly important for so many reasons. One, we are spending, I mean, this was before lockdown, we were already spending, you know, between 70 to 90% of our time indoors. Or either on the younger or older spectrum of that, then that's 90% of your time in your house. And I think also the way we use our homes is changing in terms of the energy demand. And so the performance of that house really needs to be investigated. But when we look at how the NHS has developed, they've got their long-term plan, and they're basically looking at regionalizing care. They're looking at getting rid of hospitals because they recognize that the home is where the majority of our health can be protected. And so the focus on home being healthy has now come way up the list in terms of strategically shaping how our nation is actually going to be serving people in the long term. So being able to, you know, create your house to be future fit is also really about making sure that it actually behaves in the way that you need it to. So I think the work that Dean is doing is really fascinating, but we're going to have to actually look at that a little bit more closely, you know, because we do need to start supporting people in their homes for longer, because that's where they're going to be. Because one, we do not have the skill set to provide care for people in hospitals. We just don't have enough people to do that. And so we really need to focus on having better homes, and social housing is critical to this. And so making that focus around homes being fit for health is actually, it's an important business model for the UK economic model as a whole to be resilient.
No, good point. And I think, you know, this is probably more to the delegates, but, you know, talk to Dean, get in contact with Dean, you know, because this is the point, isn't it? We need to talk to peers about what they're doing. And in the break again, I was lambasting the fact that in the 6 years, you know, from when I first started talking about this to where we are today, there's been many pilots, and it's never broken out of pilot phase. So that's why I think I was trying to get to the point early on about, I have a concern that people are constantly reinventing the same wheel. You know, they're just making it a tiny fractionally a bit more efficient or cheaper or easy to deploy, rather than someone going, yes, it works. Here's some clear outcomes. Therefore, we deploy. You know, I think are we stuck in a constant iteration spin cycle? Tom, are we?
Yeah, we are, and I think we've moved away recently from the kind of innovation lab approach to doing that because of that exact reason. For us, these things ultimately need change in ways of working that across the business. So for most interactions in an organization like L&Q, there's multiple different parts of the organization who are involved in finding that resolution, and therefore to deliver a pilot means going through all the work of changing the way that your organization is set up just to achieve that value for a small number of tenants or a small number of properties. So that's why I see it as really important to make sure that you have a really clear, very well articulated corporate strategy that says what you want to be, that says what you want to do, and therefore you can align your efforts, your work and your programs to deliver that in the best way possible. And therefore we're not talking about how do we implement IoT in housing associations. We're talking about how do we provide a better property maintenance service, how do we provide better care and support for particularly vulnerable tenants, and those are the real questions that we're asking, because it's strategic rather than tactical.
See, great point. And it's almost like we planned this, Tom. You know, this idea, the strategy, and you used repairs as a great example. You know, we've built this unconference as all about IoT, you know, and I've trumpeted IoT for years, but it's almost like I think the technology is moving so fast that we're now moving beyond it, and the danger is we approach things as a silo. So your point about how it builds into your strategy and how that strategy effectively informs new service delivery models brings us to a point where Gartner have been doing some stuff recently, and they've been coining the term assistive technology, not as we understand it in the past, which is very much care centric. It's the combination of multiple technologies. It's the combination of IoT, of things like augmented reality, of mobility, and of machine learning in terms of data analytics. This kind of stacking together of technologies to produce completely new service delivery models. So as we're coming towards the end of this session, I'd be just keen to get your opinions upon this. You know, are we now moving beyond just looking at IoT? Do we need to really start going, crap, actually, we need to start stacking stuff together? Annalise?
Well, I mean, it goes back to the point about system thinking, and this is why, you know, if you can't, you have to apply a system thinking to how we look at our homes for so many reasons. But you know, the World Economic Forum's fourth industrial revolution report really identified that this technology-driven change is actually, it's about leveling up. And we need to make sure that that's what it's actually doing. Because technology is enabling us to do things to our homes. That doesn't mean that it has to be that costly. And going back to your point about, you know, the adaptations effectively that you make to your home that make it livable. Those are things that are affordable and are game changers for a lot of people. So the strategy, and you know, one last point I just wanted to add to that, the BPIE, the Building Performance Institute of Europe, in 2018 put their report together that said basically 5 points to your home need to be censored and tested and measured for their performance. And one of them is noise, one of them is ventilation, one's air quality, one was acoustics, and I always forget the last one. But the point is that you can do your top 5, and that should be for all homes, and you can just set the bar for everybody. And I think that's what we sort of need to start doing, just saying, can we just all admit that we need to start somewhere so we can have some continuity? And that's really what it is. It's continuity management. That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. I think I posed that question, and I'm going to go to Dane next, probably with my ex-supplier hat on, where I'm thinking, you know, adoption of technology, the actual technologies itself are moving so rapidly that the danger is if we focus on one element of it, that it's never really going to get traction. Therefore, what we need to do seriously is go, yes, I'm a provider of IoT, but it integrates to an augmented reality solution. It uses machine learning to analyze the data, and it plugs into a mobility platform. Is that something that you're actively looking at as a supplier, Dane? Is this wider question of, well, how can our technology actually provide more benefit?
Yeah, from the very start, we have used the idea that anything is possible Absolutely anything possible. And with technology these days, and as I said on the conversation earlier, you know, you just have to look at your mobile phones and just see what's possible with those, that you can do whatever is required. And Annalise is absolutely right. We just have to start somewhere. And we have all been doing pilot projects. Look at all the other sectors that are using IoT for so many different things. And why can housing not do the same? And hopefully, you know, Renfrewshire Council have gone and done their own small pilot project, built it up, and now they have committed to spending a decent amount of cash on going and doing something. It's still not their whole stock, and it is, in a way, a scaled up pilot project, but it's the only way we've got to go. And, you know, yes, we have to start somewhere and keep it simple and then move on to the more complex stuff from there.
Okay. Dean, is this idea of stacking technologies together something that informs your longer term IT strategy at Mid Wales?
I think it's going to naturally evolve into that. But as Dane said, keeping it simple at the moment is really important. And I think it will naturally, as it progresses, come all together. I've experimented at home, connecting it all into Alexa with the sensors, and you can do it all. So I think we'll naturally reach that point.
Okay. Again, I get the last word. Whilst I recognise the value in stating to an organisation who wants to adopt a piece of technology, keep it simple. Having worked in this sector for so long, I have concerns that will always be way behind other areas. And I worry that in a sector that has responsibilities for the built environment and also for the well-being of people, that we can't afford to be laggers. I don't, you know, housing is never, ever going to be, you know, bleeding edge, but I worry that sometimes we fall too far behind. And when I'm looking at other sectors who are saying, yeah, assistive technology, yeah, I'm going to stack IoT, machine learning, mobility, AI, etc. Actually, when you look at it from a technology perspective, it's not groundbreaking. It's just naturally integrating things together, but creating a new service delivery model. And Tom's not on the call, unfortunately, but he's classic at coming out with great statements. When we spoke earlier on last week, he said, we're using 21st century technology, but with 20th century mindsets. I'd go one step further and say potentially 19th century mindsets. So I am worried that if we do keep it too simple, we'll continue to be laggards, where we just need to, you know, we need to inch our way up the leaderboard a little bit more. Like I say, we'll never be bleeding edge, but we just need to get ourselves a little bit further ahead. And on that point, I'm going to say thanks very much, guys. Thanks for coming back. I was looking at the time and thinking, oh, blimey, we could just keep blathering on for 30 minutes after this. I hope it's been useful for the delegates. So yeah, thanks very much, guys. I'm going to do a little closing bit for 5 minutes. So if you can just mic off and cam off, that'd be brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much again to the panel. Again, there was lots of questions, and it was really great to see all the chat going on from the delegates. So that brings us really to the end of UnCon 2. When I was promoting this, I said UnCon 2 is a tasty morsel compared to the I think it was the buffet that was UnCon 1. So for those UnCon 1 veterans, you can probably see that today's been slightly different. We've been laser focused on one particular area of technology and kept it a lot shorter. So I hope it's worked for you today. If I just take it on board of the comments and the chat, it seems to be quite a positive experience for you. I consistently say, and Dave backs me up, you know, we do not have any ambitions to become event organizers. I think we'll probably rest UnCon for a little bit in the summer and maybe come back, whether it be September or October, with another UnCon. If you enjoyed it, if you liked it, if you didn't, you know, please come back to us and let us know. You know, we can only be guided by how you react and interact with us, and how you, you know, get value from this event or this type of event. I hope you have had value. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. What I would say is, whilst the sessions are finished, please hang on the platform for a little bit longer. It's going to be kept open for at least another half an hour. If you want to network with anyone, speak to the sponsors, develop a thread of conversation further, then please do. You'll be more than welcome. I hope to see some of you in the delegate space. Have a great day. Thanks so much, everyone.